The engine indications are provided on the engine warning display and on the ECAM engine page. The displays on the EWD are always displayed, while the engine page automatically appears when the engine start is initiated by the pilot. On the next few frames, we show this display so we can describe each indicator. Starting at the top of the EWD, we see the engine pressure ratio, EPR, the exhaust gas temperature, EGT, the N1 and the N2 for each engine. We'll describe the markings for each indicator. The actual EPR is displayed by a green pointer and a green digital readout. The EPR thrust lever angle is a small white circle that displays the EPR that corresponds to the current thrust lever position. A blue arc appears momentarily to display the difference between the current EPR pointer and the EPR command value. This arc only appears during auto thrust operation and gives the crew an immediate indication of the engine trend during acceleration and deceleration. An amber mark displays the EPR maximum limit. It shows the EPR that would result if the thrust lever is positioned at full forward. When reverse thrust is selected, an amber reverse appears when a reverser door is not stowed or is unlocked. The amber display normally appears during reverser deployment or retraction. The display shows in green when the reverser doors are full open. Note, if a reverser door unlocks in flight, the display flashes amber for 9 seconds, then displays steady. The word "avail" will display in green for 9 seconds on the EPR gauge after a successful ground start to indicate that the engine is available for use. Avail will also display flashing green for 9 seconds after a successful in-flight engine start. Just below the engine EPR displays are the displays for exhaust gas temperature, EGT. The current EGT is displayed by a green pointer and a green digital readout. The amber index indicates the maximum EGT. If this temperature is exceeded, the display pulses amber. The maximum permissible EGT is indicated by the beginning of a red arc. If this temperature is exceeded, the digital display turns red and the needle pulses red. If the EGT ever exceeds the maximum permissible value, a red radial mark appears at the highest temperature point. This exceedance display remains in view until maintenance action through the MCDU or a subsequent takeoff. The N1 and N2 displays are located just below the EGT. Both of these displays appear amber before engine start, but will change when the appropriate engine spool begins to rotate. The N1 is displayed by a pointer and digital readout. Both items normally display in green, but pulse amber if the N1 is above the N1 rating limit. These displays appear in red if the N1 is above 100%. The maximum permissible N1 of 100% is indicated by a red arc drawn from 100% to the end of the scale. The red radial mark appears at the highest N1 setting if an exceedance occurs. Just like the EGT exceedance, this mark remains in view until maintenance reset or the next takeoff. The N2 is only displayed in digital format. The display is normally green on a black background, but the background displays gray during engine start and remains gray until the engine has stabilized. If the N2 ever exceeds 100%, it displays red and a red cross appears next to it. The red cross remains in view until reset by maintenance or the next takeoff. On the right side of the EWD, the current thrust limit mode is displayed. The mode changes according to the phase of flight. Here we show a typical display before takeoff. The possible displays are toga, flex, maximum continuous thrust, climb, or maximum reverse thrust. To the right is the EPR rating limit. This limit is the current EPR thrust limit for the thrust limit mode. If the flex mode is selected, the flex takeoff temperature that the pilot entered on the MCDU is displayed in blue. It is possible and normal that the value entered on the MCDU may differ slightly from the value on the EWD because of the difference in rounding logic between the two indications. Before we continue with more display descriptions, let's take a moment to describe how the thrust limit mode is determined. The determination of the thrust limit mode is different if the aircraft is on the ground with engines running or in flight. First, when the aircraft is on the ground with engines running, regardless of the position of the thrust levers, the limit is normally toga. However, if a flex takeoff temperature has been entered to the MCDU, the limit mode will display flex EPR as long as the thrust levers are between idle and flex MCT. When the aircraft is in flight or on the ground with engines stopped, the thrust limit mode corresponds to the detent of the most advanced thrust lever position. For the in-flight thrust limit mode determination, if a thrust lever is set between two positions, the FADEC selects the rating limit corresponding to the highest mode. On the other hand, when idle is selected, the FADEC selects the mode of climb. For landing or rejected takeoff when maximum reverse is selected, the EPR rating limit value is replaced by amber crosses. This is because the maximum reverse mode is limited by N1 and not by EPR. Okay, let's continue with our description of the engine indications. The fuel flow, FF for each engine, is displayed outboard of each engine EGT display. Fuel flow normally displays in green when the engine is running. When the engine is first shut down, the fuel flow shows amber crosses for 15 seconds and then displays 0. Fuel on board is displayed below the engine number 1 N2 RPM display. If there is a discrepancy between the real and the displayed EGT, N1, N2 or FF values, an amber check message displays near the affected item, and an amber ECAM message will appear. Just above the fuel on board information, feedback messages can appear in amber. Feedback messages are generated whenever a display management computer detects a possible discrepancy on a display. Check the appropriate display whenever one of these messages appear. Before we leave the EWD, let's describe the green idle indication. It appears when both engines are at idle. Idle flashes for 10 seconds when it first appears, and then remains on steady. Now let's describe the indications on the engine page. The engine page shows the fuel used by each engine. It provides continuous information when the engine is running and stops when the engine is shut down. Thus, when the aircraft is parked, the fuel used display shows the fuel used on the last flight. The fuel used display is automatically reset to 0 when the associated engine is started. If fuel flow data is interrupted for more than 1 minute, the last 2 digits display dashes to alert the crew of the inaccuracy of the fuel used display. The fuel used value is also displayed on the ECAM cruise page, so you don't have to select the engine page to get this information in flight. The engine page also displays the engine oil quantity, the oil pressure, and the oil temperature. The oil quantity normally displays steady green, but pulses if quantity is low. The oil pressure normally displays steady green, but pulses if pressure is high. The oil pressure displays amber or red if it drops below the associated values. The oil temperature normally displays as a steady green digital readout. The readout pulses if the temperature is high. The oil temperature displays amber if temperature exceeds 156 degrees Celsius for more than 15 minutes, or immediately if the temperature exceeds 165 degrees Celsius. After engine start, if the nacelle temperature is excessive, the engine nacelle temperature, NAC, will display at the bottom of the secondary engine instruments. The temperature that is excessive will pulse in green. When the pilot initiates an engine start, the engine start information appears. Ignition appears in white, and the operating igniter, A or B, appears with a green letter. The green start valve position displays the valve position, either cross-line closed or in-line open. The available air pressure for engine start displays in pounds per square inch. The right side of the engine page displays the vibration indicators. There is an indicator for the N1 and the N2 of each engine. They're normally steady green, but pulse if the detected vibration level exceeds 5. The vibration information is also displayed on the ECAM cruise page. If the differential pressure across a main oil scavenge filter becomes excessive, an amber oil filter clog display appears for the appropriate engine. Likewise, if the differential pressure across a fuel filter becomes excessive, an amber fuel filter clog display appears. Now let's answer some questions.